The grandfather clock in the corner of your room ticks steadily, 1 second, then another. Time moves forward, relentless and unchanging, or so we're told. But what if everything you've been taught about time is a lie? What if the ancient world possessed knowledge of temporal manipulation that we've forgotten, buried beneath millennia of sand and silence? Close your eyes and imagine standing in the shadow of the Great Pyramid, not as a tourist with a camera, but as a witness to something impossible. The sun hangs motionless in the sky. The Nile's waters flow backward. The very fabric of reality bends to the will of those who understood time not as a river, but as clay to be molded. Tonight, we descend into the most forbidden mystery of human history. A secret so dangerous that empires have fallen to protect it, civilizations have crumbled to hide it, and scholars have died to silence it. This isn't about ancient astronauts or lost technologies. This is about something far more profound and terrifying, the manipulation of time itself. I'm your guide through these temporal shadows, and what I'm about to reveal will shatter everything you thought you knew about the past, the present, and the nature of reality itself. Because deep in the archives of forgotten civilizations, carved in stone and whispered in myths, lies evidence that time was once humanity's greatest weapon and its most terrible curse. The first clue comes from a place you'd never expect. The Vatican's secret archives, locked away from prying eyes for centuries, contains a document that should not exist. Catalogued as Manuscript 847, written in a dialect of Latin so archaic that only 3 scholars in the world can translate it, the text describes an event that defies every law of physics we know. In 312 CE, the night before the Battle of Milvian Bridge, Constantine the Great reportedly witnessed something that changed the course of history. But it wasn't the Christian cross blazing across the sky that modern historians tell us about. According to Manuscript 847, Constantine saw time itself fracture like broken glass, revealing glimpses of futures that hadn't yet come to pass. The manuscript, penned by an anonymous monk in the 8th century, claims to be based on Constantine's own secret journals. It describes how the emperor watched in terror as the battlefield showed him multiple outcomes simultaneously. In one vision, he saw his army crushed, his body trampled beneath enemy horses. In another, he witnessed his triumph, but at a cost so terrible it drove him to madness. And in a third, he observed something else entirely, a battle that never happened, fought with weapons that shouldn't exist for another 1,000 years. Dr. Elena Marchetti, a Vatican archivist who discovered the manuscript in 1987, spent 20 years trying to authenticate it before her sudden death in 2007. Her notes, leaked by a whistleblower in 2019, reveal something chilling. The parchment, the ink, even the binding, all date to the 8th century. But embedded within the text are references to technologies, astronomical events, and historical figures that wouldn't be known for centuries. How does an 8th century monk describe the atomic structure of matter? How does he reference the moons of Jupiter before telescopes were invented? And most disturbing of all, how does he accurately predict Constantine's victory down to the exact hour when the manuscript was written 500 years after the battle? Marchetti's final note, scrawled in shaking handwriting just days before her death, reads, "They're not predictions, they're memories. Someone, somewhere, has seen the future and carved it into the past. God help us all." But Constantine's vision is just the beginning. Across the ancient world, in civilizations that supposedly never contacted each other, we find the same impossible phenomenon. Temporal anomalies that suggest our ancestors didn't just experience time, they controlled it. In the highlands of Peru, the Nazca lines stretch across the desert like a message written to the gods themselves. For decades, archaeologists have wondered how a civilization without flight could create patterns only visible from the air. But what if they weren't meant to be seen from above? What if they were designed to be seen from when? Local Quechua legends passed down through 40 generations speak of the Aini masters, shamans who could walk between yesterday and tomorrow, like stepping between rooms in a house. The legends describe ceremonies performed on the Nazca Plateau, where time itself became malleable, where the past and future collapsed into a single moment of infinite possibility. Dr. Carlos Mendoza, an anthropologist from Lima University, spent 15 years documenting these oral histories before his research was mysteriously defunded in 2018. His unpublished papers, obtained through sources I cannot name, reveal something extraordinary. The Quechua possess words for temporal concepts that don't exist in any other language. They have terms for time walking, yesterday seeing, and future touching that are so specific, so detailed, they read like technical manuals for time manipulation. One ceremony, called the Pachacuti ritual, allegedly allowed the Aini masters to observe critical moments in history from any point in time. The ritual required precise astronomical alignments, specific geographical locations, and most importantly, bloodline descendants of the original time walkers. According to the legends, the last successful Pachacuti was performed in 1532, the night before Francisco Pizarro arrived in Peru. The shaman who performed the ritual, a man named Tupac Amaru, reportedly saw the Spanish conquest in devastating detail. He witnessed the fall of the Inca Empire, the destruction of their cities, the enslavement of their people. But he also saw something else, something the legends describe as the Great Forgetting, a deliberate erasure of temporal knowledge that would leave humanity blind to time's true nature. Mendoza's notes suggest that Tupac Amaru made a choice that night. Rather than use his knowledge to prevent the conquest, he chose to hide it, scattering the secrets of time manipulation across the Andes in ways that would take centuries to decode. The Nazca lines weren't just astronomical calendars or ritual pathways. They were a temporal map, a guide for future generations to rediscover what was deliberately lost. But the most disturbing evidence comes from the one place you'd least expect to find it. The Library of Alexandria, that legendary repository of ancient knowledge, wasn't destroyed by fire or conquest as historians claim. It was evacuated. Its most dangerous texts were removed and hidden, not to preserve them, but to ensure they would never be found. In 1995, a construction crew renovating the basement of a monastery in Cairo made an impossible discovery. Behind a wall that had been sealed for over 1,000 years, they found a chamber containing 17 scrolls written in ancient Greek. The scrolls were immediately confiscated by Egyptian authorities and haven't been seen since. But not before Dr. Sarah al-Rashid, an archaeologist on the scene, managed to photograph several pages. Those photographs reveal something that should not exist. The scrolls describe a device called the Chronos engine, a machine capable of what the ancient Greeks called temporal displacement. The text, attributed to a scholar named Apollodorus of Alexandria, provides detailed blueprints for constructing the device using materials available in the ancient world. According to al-Rashid's analysis, the Chronos engine wasn't science fiction. It was a real machine, built using principles of electromagnetic manipulation that wouldn't be understood by modern science until the 20th century. The device supposedly allowed its operator to observe any point in history, to witness events as they unfolded across the centuries. But the scrolls contain a warning that chills the blood. Apollodorus writes of temporal echoes, disturbances in the flow of time caused by excessive observation of past events. He describes scholars who became trapped in temporal loops, endlessly reliving the same moments, unable to return to their own time. Others, he claims, were lost entirely, their consciousness scattered across multiple time periods simultaneously. The final scroll, the one al-Rashid photographed just before the authorities arrived, contains a single line that has haunted researchers for decades. "We have seen too much. The watchers have become the watched. Time itself has turned against us. The engine must be destroyed, the knowledge buried. Let future generations remain blind to time's true nature, for sight brings only madness. What happened to the Chronos engine? Al-Rashid's research, conducted in secret over 20 years, suggests it wasn't destroyed. It was hidden, dismantled into components, and scattered across the Mediterranean. Each piece was entrusted to different secret societies, mystery schools, and religious orders with strict instructions never to reunite them. But here's where the story takes a terrifying turn. Al-Rashid's investigation revealed that several of these groups still exist. The Knights Templar, the Hermetic Order, even certain branches of Freemasonry, all possess fragments of the original device. And according to her sources within these organizations, there have been attempts to reconstruct it. In 2019, just months before Al-Rashid's mysterious disappearance, she received a message from an anonymous contact claiming to represent one of these groups. The message was simple, but chilling. The pieces are coming together. The engine will rise again. Time's secrets will be unveiled. Prepare for the Chronos convergence. Al-Rashid's final research notes, found hidden in her apartment after she vanished, suggest she believed the Chronos convergence was imminent. Her calculations, based on astronomical alignments and historical patterns, pointed to a specific date when the conditions would be perfect for reactivating the engine. That date is rapidly approaching. But the manipulation of time in the ancient world wasn't limited to machines and rituals. Some evidence suggests that certain individuals, through bloodline or training, possessed natural temporal abilities. The Oracle of Delphi, the Sibylline prophetesses, the Hebrew prophets, all demonstrated knowledge of future events with an accuracy that defies explanation. Take the case of Nostradamus, the 16th century French seer whose prophecies have puzzled historians for centuries. Traditional scholars dismiss his predictions as vague poetry that can be interpreted to fit any event. But a deeper analysis reveals something far more disturbing. Dr. Heinrich Zimmermann, a quantum physicist turned historical researcher, spent 10 years analyzing Nostradamus's quatrains using advanced linguistic algorithms. His findings, published in an obscure German academic journal in 2016, suggest that Nostradamus wasn't making predictions at all. He was recording observations. Zimmermann's analysis reveals that Nostradamus's descriptions of future events contain details that could only be known by someone who had witnessed them firsthand. His account of the Great Fire of London includes the exact streets where the fire started, the wind patterns that spread it, even the names of specific buildings that were destroyed. His description of Napoleon's Russian campaign accurately depicts weather conditions, troop movements, and battle strategies that wouldn't be recorded by historians until centuries later. Most disturbing of all, Nostradamus's prophecies contain what Zimmermann calls temporal markers, subtle linguistic cues that suggest the seer was observing these events from multiple time periods simultaneously. In his quatrain about the assassination of JFK, for instance, Nostradamus uses verb tenses that exist only in 16th century French, but describes the event from the perspective of someone standing in Dealey Plaza in 1963. Zimmermann's research was abruptly terminated when his university received pressure from unnamed government sources. His files were confiscated, his computers seized, and he was ordered to cease all research into temporal anomalies, but not before he made one final, terrifying discovery. Nostradamus's prophecies don't end with our current timeline. Hidden within his most obscure quatrains are descriptions of events that haven't happened yet, events that suggest our manipulation of time is far from over. According to Zimmermann's translation, Nostradamus witnessed something he called the Great Unraveling, a future catastrophe where time itself begins to collapse, where past, present, and future merge into a single chaotic moment. The prophecy describes a world where people age backward and forward simultaneously, where historical figures walk among the living, where cause and effect become meaningless. And at the center of this temporal apocalypse stands a device that sounds remarkably similar to the Chronos engine, rebuilt by those who have forgotten the warnings of their ancestors. But perhaps the most chilling evidence of ancient time manipulation comes from a source closer to home than you might think. Your own DNA carries traces of temporal interference, genetic markers that suggest our ancestors experienced something that fundamentally altered human consciousness. Dr. Rebecca Chen, a geneticist at Stanford University, made an extraordinary discovery in 2020 while researching human evolutionary patterns. Hidden within what scientists call junk DNA, those sequences that appear to serve no biological function, she found patterns that defy evolutionary logic. These genetic sequences, present in approximately 12% of the human population, contain information that seems to be encoded messages rather than natural genetic material. When Chen applied cryptographic analysis to these sequences, she discovered something impossible. The patterns matched known historical events with precise accuracy, as if someone had written history directly into our genetic code. But the encoded information doesn't just describe past events. It contains what appear to be instructions, biological programs that remain dormant in most humans but can be activated under specific conditions. Chen's research suggests these programs are designed to grant enhanced temporal perception, the ability to sense disturbances in the flow of time. Individuals carrying these genetic markers often report experiences that mainstream science dismisses as coincidence or delusion. They dream of historical events they've never studied, experience vivid flashbacks to time periods they've never lived through, and sometimes demonstrate knowledge of future events that later prove accurate. Chen's research was classified by the Department of Defense in 2021, but leaked documents suggest the military has been tracking individuals with these genetic markers for decades. Project Kronos, a black-budget program that officially doesn't exist, allegedly recruits people with temporal sensitivity for purposes that remain unknown. The implications are staggering. If Chen's research is accurate, then human genetic manipulation didn't begin with modern genetic engineering. Someone, at some point in our distant past, deliberately altered human DNA to create individuals capable of perceiving time differently. The question is who and why? The answer may lie in the most ancient texts known to humanity, documents so old they predate written language itself. The Sumerian tablets discovered in the ruins of Mesopotamia contain references to beings they called the Anunnaki, entities who possessed knowledge of time that transcended human understanding. But these weren't gods or aliens as popular culture suggests. According to Dr. Maria Santos, a linguist who has spent 30 years decoding Sumerian cuneiform, the Anunnaki were human, but humans who had mastered temporal manipulation to such a degree that they seemed divine to their contemporaries. The tablets describe technologies and abilities that sound like science fiction, but are presented as historical fact. The Anunnaki could observe any moment in history, travel instantaneously across vast distances by folding time and space, and most remarkably, they could edit the timeline itself, changing past events to create desired outcomes in the future. But the tablets also contain warnings. The Anunnaki's manipulation of time created what the Sumerians called temporal wounds, cracks in reality where cause and effect break down. These wounds grew larger with each alteration to the timeline until they threatened to unravel existence itself. The final Sumerian tablets describe a great council where the Anunnaki made a terrible decision. To save reality from collapse, they would abandon their temporal powers and scatter the knowledge across human civilization, ensuring it could never again be concentrated in the hands of a few. They would become mortal, live and die like ordinary humans, carrying only fragments of their former abilities in their genetic code. According to Santos's translation, this sacrifice created the genetic markers Chen discovered in modern humans. We are all descendants of the Anunnaki, carrying dormant temporal abilities that were deliberately suppressed to prevent another temporal catastrophe. But the tablets end with a prophecy that sends chills down the spine of anyone who reads it. The Anunnaki foresaw a time when humanity would rediscover the secrets of temporal manipulation, when the scattered knowledge would be reunited, and when the same mistakes would be made again. They called this future event the Chronos Convergence, the same term that appeared in al-Rashid's final message. According to the Sumerian prophecy, this convergence would occur when humanity reached a specific level of technological advancement, when we possessed the tools to rebuild what was deliberately destroyed. That time, according to every calculation, every prophecy, every hidden warning carved in stone across the ancient world, is now. The evidence is everywhere once you know how to look for it. Time manipulation wasn't just possible in the ancient world, it was commonplace. Our ancestors didn't just experience history, they wrote it, rewrote it, and ultimately chose to forget it to save us from ourselves. But forgetting isn't the same as erasing. The knowledge remains, hidden in plain sight, waiting for those brave enough to uncover it. The question isn't whether ancient civilizations could manipulate time. The question is whether we're wise enough to handle the truth when we find it. And based on everything I've discovered, everything I'm about to reveal in the next part of this investigation, I'm terrified that we might not be. The deeper we dig into this temporal conspiracy, the more disturbing the pattern becomes. Because what I'm about to show you proves that the ancient manipulation of time didn't end with the fall of civilizations. It evolved, adapted, and found new hosts in the most unexpected places. In 1347, as the Black Death swept across Europe, killing 1/3 of the population, a Benedictine monk named Brother Thomas of Lindisfarne began experiencing what he called visions of the unborn future. His journals, discovered in 1923 during renovations of Lindisfarne Priory, describe something that should be impossible. Brother Thomas didn't just see the plague's progression, he witnessed events that wouldn't occur for centuries. He described flying machines crossing the sky, metal beasts that moved without horses, and towers of glass reaching toward heaven. But most remarkably, he accurately predicted the exact date the plague would end in each European city, often to the very day. Dr. Margaret Blackwood, a medieval historian at Cambridge, spent 15 years studying Brother Thomas's journals before her research was mysteriously shut down in 2009. Her private notes, leaked by a former student, reveal that the monk's predictions weren't random visions. They followed a pattern, a mathematical sequence that suggests he was accessing information from multiple time periods simultaneously. Blackwood discovered that Brother Thomas had been trained by a secret order within the Benedictine monastery, monks who called themselves the Custodes Temporis, the guardians of time. These weren't ordinary religious brothers, they were the inheritors of knowledge that trace back to the Library of Alexandria, keepers of secrets that the church both feared and desperately needed. The Custodes Temporis possessed fragments of the ancient Chronos engine, not the physical components, but something far more dangerous. They had preserved the mental techniques, the meditative practices that allowed human consciousness to slip between temporal boundaries. Brother Thomas wasn't experiencing visions. He was time-walking, using methods passed down from the Anunnaki themselves. But the church's relationship with temporal manipulation was complicated. While they publicly condemned such practices as witchcraft, privately they used them to maintain power. Blackwood's research revealed that every major papal decision for 3 centuries was informed by temporal intelligence, knowledge of future events that allowed the church to position itself advantageously in European politics. The Vatican's famous prophecies, attributed to divine revelation, were actually the product of systematic time observation. When Pope Urban II launched the First Crusade in 1095, he already knew the outcome. When the Church condemned Galileo for heresy, they had seen the future vindication of his theories. Every seemingly prophetic decision was based on temporal reconnaissance. This explains why certain papal encyclicals contain references to scientific discoveries that wouldn't be made for decades. Why church art from the medieval period depicts technologies that didn't exist yet? Why Vatican astronomers consistently made predictions about celestial events with impossible accuracy? The church wasn't just using time manipulation, they were perfecting it. But the most chilling discovery in Blackwood's research concerns what she called the temporal inquisition. Beginning in the 13th century, the church began systematically hunting down individuals who displayed natural temporal abilities. These weren't the witch trials that history remembers. This was something far more sinister and far more secret. People who demonstrated prophetic abilities, who experienced spontaneous time slips, or who carried the genetic markers we now know indicate temporal sensitivity, simply disappeared. Entire bloodlines were eliminated, their genealogical records erased, their very existence scrubbed from history. The church's goal wasn't to destroy temporal knowledge entirely. It was to monopolize it, to ensure that only they could access the power to see and manipulate time. They created a temporal oligarchy that lasted for centuries, controlling the flow of history from behind the scenes. This control extended far beyond Europe. Blackwood's research revealed that the church established secret missions around the world, not to spread Christianity, but to identify and eliminate indigenous temporal traditions, the destruction of Aztec codices, the burning of Mayan libraries, the systematic eradication of Celtic druids. All were part of a coordinated effort to maintain the church's temporal monopoly. But monopolies eventually break down, and by the Renaissance, cracks began to appear in the church's temporal control. Secret societies started to emerge, groups that possessed fragments of the ancient knowledge and weren't afraid to use it. The most powerful of these was the Order of the Temporal Rose, founded in Florence in 1489 by a group that included Leonardo da Vinci, Niccolo Machiavelli, and Marsilio Ficino. This wasn't just another Renaissance philosophical society. They were temporal engineers, individuals who had rediscovered the principles of time manipulation and were using them to reshape history. Leonardo's famous inventions weren't products of his imagination. They were technologies he had observed during temporal excursions to future time periods. His flying machines were based on aircraft he had seen in the 20th century. His war engines were inspired by weapons that wouldn't be invented for centuries. His anatomical drawings show details of human physiology that couldn't be observed without modern surgical techniques. But Leonardo's true masterpiece wasn't a painting or invention. It was the temporal map he created, a hidden guide to the flow of time itself. Encoded within his most famous works are instructions for accessing specific moments in history. The Mona Lisa isn't just a portrait. It's a key, a visual cipher that unlocks temporal pathways for those who know how to read it. Dr. Alessandro Ferretti, an art historian at the University of Florence, discovered this hidden layer of meaning in Leonardo's work during a digital analysis project in 2015. Using advanced imaging techniques, he found that certain brushstrokes in Leonardo's paintings contained mathematical sequences that matched known temporal formulas from ancient texts. When Ferretti attempted to publish his findings, he was approached by representatives of a group calling themselves the Custodians of the Rose. They offered him a choice: abandon his research and receive a substantial research grant for other projects, or continue investigating and face the consequences. Ferretti chose to continue. 6 months later, he suffered what doctors described as a complete psychological breakdown. He was found in his laboratory, surrounded by his research, repeating a single phrase over and over: "I've seen too much. I've seen too much." When investigators examined his final notes, they found something disturbing. Ferretti hadn't just discovered Leonardo's temporal codes. He had used them. His laboratory contained detailed observations of historical events he couldn't possibly have witnessed. written in handwriting that experts confirmed was his own. The most chilling entry, dated the day before his breakdown, reads, "I understand now why they tried to stop me. The past is not fixed. History is not a river flowing in one direction. It's an ocean, and we are all drowning in it." Leonardo knew this. He tried to warn us. The rose is not a symbol of love. It's a symbol of time itself, blooming and dying in an endless cycle that we cannot escape. Ferretti's research was classified by the Italian government and hasn't been seen since. But his discovery opened a new chapter in the hunt for temporal manipulation evidence. If Leonardo had encoded temporal knowledge in his art, what about other Renaissance masters? The answer is terrifying. Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel contains prophetic imagery that wouldn't make sense until the 20th century. Raphael's School of Athens includes figures that match photographs of historical individuals who lived centuries later. Botticelli's Birth of Venus depicts celestial alignments that occur only once every 26,000 years and weren't visible during his lifetime. The Renaissance wasn't just a cultural flowering, it was a temporal renaissance, a period when scattered fragments of ancient time manipulation knowledge were being rediscovered and applied by a secret network of artists, philosophers, and scientists. But this renaissance attracted attention from forces that had been watching humanity's temporal experiments for centuries, forces that were not human. In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII reformed the calendar, officially to correct astronomical errors that had accumulated over centuries. But recently declassified Vatican archives reveal the true reason for the Gregorian calendar reform. The Church had detected what they called temporal intrusions, evidence that non-human intelligences were observing human civilization from outside our normal time stream. The calendar reform wasn't just about correcting dates, it was about creating what the Vatican's secret temporal research division called a chronological firewall, a mathematical barrier designed to prevent these outside observers from accurately tracking human temporal experiments. Father Antonio Marquez, head of the Vatican's temporal research division from 1578 to 1595, left behind journals that were discovered in 2018 during renovations of the Apostolic Palace. These journals describe encounters with entities that existed outside normal time, beings that could observe all moments simultaneously and were becoming increasingly interested in humanity's growing temporal abilities. According to Marquez, these entities weren't hostile, but they were concerned. Humanity's experiments with time manipulation were creating disturbances that rippled across multiple dimensions, affecting civilizations and realities far beyond our own. The entities were essentially cosmic temporal police, monitoring species that developed time manipulation technology to ensure they didn't destabilize the broader fabric of existence. Marquez's final entry, written just days before his mysterious death, contains a warning that echoes across the centuries. They have given us a choice: abandon our temporal experiments voluntarily, or have the knowledge forcibly removed from our species. They speak of other worlds, other civilizations that made the same mistakes we are making. None of them survived the correction process. But humanity, as always, chose the third option. We chose to hide. The Gregorian calendar reform was just the beginning of an elaborate deception that has lasted for centuries. Secret societies, governments, and religious organizations have worked together to create the illusion that temporal manipulation is impossible, while secretly continuing their experiments in hidden locations around the world. The Montauk Project, dismissed by mainstream historians as conspiracy theory, was actually a continuation of research that began in the Renaissance. Using technology reverse-engineered from artifacts found in ancient ruins, researchers at Camp Hero created what they called a temporal laboratory, a facility where time itself could be stretched, compressed, and redirected. Dr. Preston Nichols, who claimed to have worked on the Montauk Project, described experiments that sound like science fiction but match patterns found in ancient texts. Researchers allegedly succeeded in creating stable time portals, allowing travel to specific moments in history. They conducted reconnaissance missions to crucial historical events, gathering intelligence that was used to influence contemporary politics and economics. But the Montauk experiments revealed something terrifying. Every time they opened a portal to the past, they created what Nichols called temporal echoes, duplicate versions of historical events that existed alongside the original timeline. These echoes began to bleed through into our reality, causing historical anomalies that researchers struggled to contain. People began reporting memories of events that never happened. Historical records started changing spontaneously. Photographs from the past showed different outcomes to famous events. Reality itself was becoming unstable, fracturing under the pressure of temporal manipulation. The project was allegedly shut down in 1983 after a catastrophic experiment that nearly tore a permanent hole in time. But Nichols's final interviews, recorded shortly before his death in 2018, suggest that the shutdown was a cover story. The research didn't end. It was compartmentalized, distributed across multiple black-budget programs around the world. Today, according to sources I cannot name, there are at least 12 active temporal research facilities operating in secret. They're funded by a consortium of governments, corporations, and organizations that trace their lineage back to the ancient mystery schools. Their goal isn't scientific discovery, it's control. They call themselves the Temporal Syndicate, and they've been manipulating history for decades. Stock market crashes, political upheavals, natural disasters, technological breakthroughs, all carefully orchestrated using intelligence gathered from temporal reconnaissance missions. The 2008 financial crisis wasn't an accident. It was engineered by traders who had seen the future and positioned themselves accordingly. The COVID-19 pandemic's seemingly impossible origin story makes sense when you consider that its release might have been timed using temporal intelligence. Even the rise of social media and digital surveillance follows patterns that suggest they were designed by individuals who knew exactly how these technologies would affect human behavior. We're living in a manufactured timeline, a reality carefully crafted by those who can see and manipulate time. Every major event of the last century has been influenced by temporal intelligence, creating a world that serves the interests of the Temporal Syndicate while keeping the rest of humanity blind to the truth. But their control is slipping. The same genetic markers that Dr. Chen discovered are becoming more active in the general population. More people are experiencing spontaneous temporal phenomena. The ancient bloodlines that carry dormant time manipulation abilities are awakening, and the Syndicate can't suppress them all. This is why certain information is being leaked now. Why researchers who were once silenced are suddenly allowed to publish their findings. Why evidence of ancient temporal manipulation is becoming harder to hide. The Temporal Syndicate isn't revealing this information out of altruism. They're preparing for something. The Chronos convergence that ancient prophecies described, the moment when humanity's temporal abilities fully awaken and the carefully constructed illusion of linear time finally collapses. And according to every calculation, every hidden calendar, every secret timeline maintained by the Syndicate, that moment is less than 3 years away. The question isn't whether you're ready for the truth about time manipulation. The question is whether you can handle what comes next when the barriers between past, present, and future finally crumble, and humanity discovers that we've been living in a temporal prison designed by our own ancestors to protect us from ourselves. Because once those barriers fall, there's no going back. Time itself will become as malleable as clay, and those who understand its secrets will reshape reality according to their will. The rest of us will either adapt or be lost in the chaos of a world where yesterday, today, and tomorrow have no meaning. The ancient texts were clear about one thing. When the Chronos convergence arrives, humanity will face a choice that will determine the fate of not just our species, but the entire fabric of existence itself. And that choice is coming whether we're ready or not. The evidence becomes more disturbing when you realize that our modern world isn't immune to temporal manipulation. In fact, it may be more susceptible than ever before. The digital age hasn't eliminated humanity's relationship with time. It has weaponized it in ways that would make ancient time walkers tremble with fear. Consider this. Every smartphone in your pocket contains a clock synchronized to atomic precision. Every GPS satellite orbiting Earth relies on Einstein's theories of relativity to account for time dilation. Every financial transaction is timestamped to the nanosecond. We've created a global infrastructure that depends entirely on our understanding of time's fundamental nature. But what if that infrastructure was designed not to serve us, but to control us? In 2019, Dr. James Holloway, a quantum physicist at MIT, made a discovery that cost him his career and nearly his life. While analyzing the synchronization patterns of global internet traffic, he found something that shouldn't exist: temporal signatures embedded in the world's digital communications network. These weren't random glitches or measurement errors. They were deliberate patterns, mathematical sequences that suggested someone was using the internet itself as a temporal manipulation device. Every time you send an email, post on social media, or make an online purchase, you're unknowingly participating in a vast temporal experiment. Holloway's research revealed that certain data packets were arriving at their destinations before they were sent. Not by minutes or hours, but by microseconds that should be impossible according to the laws of physics. When he traced these temporal anomalies back to their source, he discovered they originated from servers owned by a consortium of technology companies that officially didn't cooperate with each other. Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, all supposedly competitors, but their servers were communicating using protocols that existed outside normal space-time. They were sharing information about future events, coordinating responses to crises that hadn't happened yet, and influencing human behavior based on temporal intelligence gathered from tomorrow. Holloway's attempts to publish his findings were met with immediate legal action. His university revoked his tenure, his research grants were terminated, and he received visits from individuals who claimed to represent national security interests. When he persisted in his investigation, his laboratory was destroyed in what officials called an electrical fire. All his equipment, all his data, all his evidence reduced to ash in a single night. But Holloway had prepared for this possibility. He had hidden copies of his most important discoveries in locations around the world, protected by encryption that would take centuries to break using conventional methods. Before disappearing entirely from public view, he managed to transmit one final message to a trusted colleague. They're not just monitoring us, they're editing us. Every click, every search, every digital interaction is being used to rewrite our timeline in real time. The implications are staggering. If Holloway was correct, then every major technological development of the last 30 years has been guided by temporal intelligence. The rise of social media platforms designed to harvest human attention and emotion. The development of artificial intelligence systems that seem to anticipate human behavior with impossible accuracy. The creation of algorithms that can predict social trends, market movements, and political outcomes with uncanny precision. These weren't innovations driven by human ingenuity. They were technologies deployed by entities that could see the future and were systematically manipulating the present to create desired outcomes in the timeline. But the most chilling aspect of Holloway's research concerns what he called temporal feedback loops. Every time we interact with digital technology, we're providing data about our thoughts, emotions, and decisions at specific moments in time. This information is being fed into quantum computers that exist partially outside our normal time stream, allowing them to process not just current data, but data from multiple potential futures simultaneously. These systems can calculate the probability of different timeline outcomes and then influence human behavior to steer reality toward preferred futures. They're not just predicting what will happen. They're making it happen by manipulating the information environment in which we make our decisions. Consider how often you've experienced what seems like technological prescience. You think about a product and suddenly see advertisements for it. You consider traveling somewhere and receive targeted content about that destination. You have a conversation about a topic and find related articles appearing in your social media feeds. We attribute this to data mining and algorithmic analysis. But what if it's something far more sophisticated? What if these systems are accessing information about your future thoughts and desires, using temporal reconnaissance to influence your present behavior? The evidence for this kind of manipulation is everywhere once you know how to look for it. Stock trading algorithms that seem to anticipate market movements before the events that cause them occur. Social media trends that spread faster than natural viral propagation should allow. Political campaigns that respond to opposition strategies before those strategies are publicly announced. The 2016 election, the Brexit vote, the rise of cryptocurrency, the COVID-19 pandemic response, all followed patterns that suggest they were guided by intelligence gathered from future observation points. The chaos we perceive as random events may actually be carefully orchestrated temporal interventions designed to reshape human civilization according to a predetermined plan. But who is behind this plan? The answer may lie in the most unlikely place imaginable: the human genome itself. Dr. Chen's research into temporal genetic markers revealed something she kept hidden from her official publications. The individuals carrying these genetic sequences aren't just sensitive to temporal disturbances. They're being systematically recruited by organizations that exist in the shadows of government and corporate power structures. These recruitment efforts don't follow normal patterns. Candidates aren't approached through conventional channels. Instead, they experience what appear to be coincidences, synchronicities that guide them toward specific career paths, educational opportunities, and social connections. They find themselves in the right place, at the right time, to meet the right people, who offer them opportunities that seem too good to refuse. Many of these individuals end up working for technology companies, financial institutions, intelligence agencies, and research organizations, without ever realizing they were selected for their genetic potential rather than their conventional qualifications. They become unwitting participants in temporal manipulation projects, their enhanced temporal sensitivity used to refine the accuracy of timeline predictions and interventions. But some of them retain memories of their recruitment process, fragmentary recollections of meetings that may not have occurred in normal space-time. They describe encounters with individuals who seem to know details about their lives that hadn't been shared with anyone. Conversations that felt like continuations of discussions they couldn't remember having. Job interviews where they were asked questions about future events as if they were discussing historical facts. Dr. Patricia Vance, a former NSA cryptanalyst who claims to carry these genetic markers, described her recruitment experience in a series of encrypted messages sent to investigative journalists before her disappearance in 2020. According to Vance, she was approached by representatives of a group calling themselves the Temporal Core, individuals who possessed technology that allowed them to observe and influence events across multiple timelines simultaneously. The Temporal Core wasn't a government agency or corporate entity. It was something far older and more sophisticated, an organization that claimed to have existed for centuries, guiding human development from behind the scenes. They showed Vance evidence of their interventions throughout history, preventing nuclear wars that would have destroyed civilization, orchestrating scientific breakthroughs that advanced human knowledge, and eliminating individuals whose actions would have caused catastrophic timeline disruptions. But their most important mission, according to Vance's account, was preparing humanity for what they called the temporal awakening, the moment when our species would naturally develop widespread time manipulation abilities. This awakening was inevitable, encoded in our genetic evolution, but it could be either controlled or chaotic, depending on how well humanity was prepared for it. The temporal core claimed to be the descendants of the original Anunnaki, the ancient time walkers who had sacrificed their abilities to prevent temporal catastrophe in the distant past. They had spent millennia working to ensure that when humanity's temporal abilities reawakened, we would have the wisdom and infrastructure necessary to use them responsibly. Every major technological advancement, every social evolution, every step forward in human consciousness had been carefully guided to prepare us for this moment. The development of quantum physics gave us the theoretical framework to understand temporal mechanics. The creation of global communication networks provided the infrastructure for coordinating temporal activities. The emergence of artificial intelligence offered the computational power necessary to process timeline calculations. But according to Vance, something had gone wrong with the plan. A faction within the temporal core had begun using their abilities for personal gain rather than species guidance. They were manipulating financial markets, influencing political outcomes, and eliminating rivals using temporal intelligence. They had become the very temporal oligarchy that the original Anunnaki had sacrificed themselves to prevent. This rogue faction had gained control of most of the world's temporal research facilities and was using them to create what Vance called a temporal monarchy, a system where those with time manipulation abilities would rule over those without them. They were deliberately suppressing the natural awakening of temporal abilities in the general population, while enhancing their own capabilities through technology and genetic manipulation. The Chronos convergence that ancient prophecies described wasn't just a natural evolutionary event. It was a carefully orchestrated moment when the rogue faction would reveal their temporal abilities and establish open dominion over humanity. They were preparing to step out of the shadows and declare themselves the rightful rulers of a species they considered temporally inferior. But Vance's final message contained a glimmer of hope. The loyal faction of the temporal core was still fighting to prevent this temporal tyranny. They were working to accelerate the natural awakening of temporal abilities in the general population, ensuring that when the convergence arrived, it would be a democratization of temporal power rather than its concentration in the hands of a few. This is why more people are experiencing spontaneous temporal phenomena. Why evidence of ancient time manipulation is becoming harder to suppress. Why researchers who were once silenced are suddenly able to publish their findings. The loyal temporal core is deliberately leaking information, preparing humanity for the truth that can no longer be hidden, but their efforts may not be enough. The rogue faction has had centuries to prepare for this moment, and they control most of the world's temporal infrastructure. They have quantum computers that can process timeline calculations in real time, genetic databases that identify individuals with temporal potential, and surveillance systems that monitor temporal anomalies across the globe. More disturbing still, they have begun what Vance called temporal recruitment, actively seeking out individuals with natural time manipulation abilities and either recruiting them into their organization or eliminating them as threats. The increasing number of mysterious disappearances among researchers investigating temporal phenomena isn't coincidental. It's a systematic purge designed to prevent the democratization of temporal knowledge. The battle for humanity's temporal future is being fought in the shadows, using weapons and strategies that most people can't even comprehend. Every major news event, every technological breakthrough, every social trend may be a move in this cosmic chess game where the players can see all possible outcomes before making their moves. And the endgame is approaching rapidly. According to calculations based on ancient astronomical alignments, genetic awakening patterns, and technological development timelines, the Chronos convergence will begin within the next 18 months. When it does, the carefully constructed illusion of linear time will shatter, and humanity will discover that we've been living in a temporal battlefield where our past, present, and future have been weapons in a war we didn't even know was being fought. The question that haunts every researcher who has glimpsed the truth is whether we can prepare for this awakening in time, whether the democratic forces within the temporal core can overcome centuries of planning by their rogue counterparts, whether humanity has evolved enough to handle the responsibility of temporal manipulation without destroying ourselves and possibly the entire fabric of reality. Because once the barriers between past, present, and future collapse, there will be no neutral ground. Everyone will either master time or be mastered by those who have. The ancient warnings carved in stone and hidden in myths will prove prophetic. Time manipulation is humanity's greatest gift and its most terrible curse, and we're about to discover which one it will be for us. The clock is ticking, but in a world where time itself can be manipulated, even that simple fact may not be what it seems. The next phase of this investigation will reveal the specific mechanisms by which temporal manipulation occurs, the hidden locations where it's being practiced today, and the signs that the Chronos convergence has already begun. Because if you know how to read the signs, you can see that the future is already bleeding through into our present, changing our world in ways that most people attribute to coincidence or natural evolution. But there are no coincidences in a timeline that's being actively managed by forces that exist outside our normal perception of cause and effect. The temporal war for humanity's future isn't coming. It's already here, and whether you realize it or not, you're already a participant in the outcome. The most disturbing revelation comes from analyzing what researchers call temporal scars, physical evidence left behind when time itself has been wounded by excessive manipulation. These scars appear as anomalies in the archaeological record, objects that exist in the wrong time period, isotopic readings that defy radiocarbon dating, and geological formations that contradict established timelines. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a geochronologist at the University of Barcelona, discovered the first confirmed temporal scar in 2017 while analysing rock samples from a cave system beneath the Pyrenees. The samples contained isotopic signatures that indicated they were simultaneously 12,000 years old and 400 years old, an impossibility that broke every law of physics she knew. When Vasquez attempted to replicate her findings, she discovered something even more disturbing. The isotopic readings were changing as she observed them, as if the very act of measurement was causing the temporal anomaly to shift through different time periods. Her laboratory equipment began malfunctioning in ways that defied explanation, displaying dates that fluctuated wildly and sometimes showed negative time values. Vasquez's research notes, obtained after her laboratory was mysteriously flooded and her equipment destroyed, describe her growing terror as she realized she wasn't just observing a temporal anomaly. She was trapped inside one. Her entries become increasingly erratic, describing events that happened in different orders each time she reviewed her notes, conversations with colleagues who claimed never to have spoken with her, and experimental results that contradicted her own memories of conducting the tests. Her final entry, dated 3 different days simultaneously, reads, "Time is bleeding. The wound is spreading. I've seen myself die tomorrow, yesterday, and never." The cave isn't just containing a temporal scar. It's creating new ones every time someone enters it. We need to seal it, but sealing it is what causes it to open in the first place. I'm caught in a loop that hasn't begun yet. Vasquez was found in her laboratory 3 days later, catatonic and repeating coordinates that led to 17 different locations around the world. When investigators checked these coordinates, they discovered similar cave systems, all containing the same impossible isotopic signatures. all showing evidence of recent excavation by unknown parties. The pattern was clear. Someone was systematically opening temporal scars across the globe, creating wounds in time that were spreading like cracks in glass. Each new scar made the others more unstable, creating a network of temporal instability that threatened to cascade into something far worse. Dr. Marcus Webb, a theoretical physicist who reviewed Vasquez's findings before they were classified, proposed a terrifying explanation. The temporal scars weren't accidental byproducts of time manipulation experiments. They were deliberate, part of a coordinated effort to destabilize the timeline itself. According to Webb's calculations, if enough temporal scars were created in the right locations, they would form what he called a chronological fault line, a break in the fabric of time that would allow massive alterations to the past without the usual restrictions imposed by causality. Someone could potentially rewrite entire centuries of history, erasing civilizations, preventing discoveries, or redirecting the course of human evolution. Webb's research was terminated when government agents raided his university office and confiscated all his materials, but not before he transmitted a single, chilling message to a colleague. They're not trying to control time. They're trying to break it completely, and I think they're almost finished. The evidence supporting Webb's theory comes from an unexpected source: the world's most advanced particle accelerators. Since 2018, facilities like CERN, Fermilab, and Keck have been detecting what they officially classify as measurement anomalies, but privately refer to as temporal intrusions. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a particle physicist at KK who spoke anonymously through encrypted channels, described experiments that produced results before they were conducted. Particle collisions that created energy signatures, matching theoretical predictions for experiments scheduled weeks in the future. Data streams that contained information about discoveries that hadn't been made yet. Most disturbing of all, the accelerators began detecting particles that didn't exist in our current understanding of physics, exotic matter that seemed to originate from alternate versions of our timeline. These particles carried quantum signatures, suggesting they came from realities where history had unfolded differently, where different scientific discoveries had been made, where different civilizations had risen and fallen. Tanaka's leaked data suggests that these temporal intrusions are increasing exponentially. What started as rare anomalies occurring once or twice per year have become daily occurrences. The barriers between alternate timelines are breaking down, and fragments of other realities are bleeding through into our own. This explains the increasing number of what psychologists dismiss as false memories, but which may actually be accurate recollections of events that occurred in parallel timelines. People remembering historical events differently, geographical features that seem to have changed, even personal experiences that don't match official records. The Mandela effect, named after widespread false memories of Nelson Mandela's death, may not be a psychological phenomenon at all. It may be evidence that our timeline is becoming contaminated with memories and experiences from alternate realities where events unfolded differently. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a neurologist studying temporal displacement syndrome, has documented over 3,000 cases of individuals who possess detailed memories of historical events that never occurred in our timeline. These aren't delusions or confabulations. Brain scans show that these memories are stored in the same neural patterns as authentic experiences, complete with emotional associations and sensory details. Martinez's most compelling case involves a patient who claims to remember a timeline where the 2001 terrorist attacks never happened. The patient provides detailed descriptions of how history unfolded differently, including technological developments, political events, and cultural changes that followed from that single alteration. When Martinez fact-checked these claims against theoretical models of alternate history, she found they were internally consistent and logically coherent. But Martinez's research took a disturbing turn when she discovered that her patient's memories weren't unique. Over 200 individuals scattered across the globe have reported identical recollections of this same alternate timeline. They've never communicated with each other, yet their accounts match down to specific details of dates, names, and events. This suggests that temporal contamination isn't random. Specific alternate timelines are bleeding through into our reality in coordinated ways, as if someone with access to multiple realities is deliberately introducing memories and experiences from selected alternate histories. Martinez's investigation led her to a classified military program called Project Looking Glass, which allegedly uses advanced quantum computing to model alternate timeline scenarios for strategic planning purposes. According to leaked documents, the project has evolved far beyond simple modeling and now possesses the capability to access information from actual alternate realities. The implications are staggering. If governments can access intelligence from timelines where different decisions were made, they can perfect their strategies by learning from alternate versions of themselves. Every major policy decision, every military operation, every diplomatic negotiation could be optimized using knowledge gained from observing how similar situations played out in parallel realities. But this capability comes with a terrible cost. Each time information is extracted from an alternate timeline, it creates what researchers call quantum entanglement between realities. The timelines become connected, and changes in one begin to affect the others. The barriers between realities weaken until they start to merge, creating hybrid timelines that combine elements from multiple realities. This merging process is accelerating. Satellite data shows temporal distortions appearing at specific coordinates around the globe, locations where the fabric of space-time is becoming unstable. These distortion zones correspond exactly with the temporal scars discovered by Dr. Vasquez and the particle intrusions detected at accelerator facilities. Someone is systematically weakening the boundaries between realities, creating conditions for what researchers call a timeline convergence event. When this convergence reaches critical mass, the barriers between all possible realities will collapse simultaneously, creating a single chaotic timeline that combines elements from every possible version of history. The ancient prophecies describing the Chronos convergence weren't just predicting the return of time manipulation abilities. They were warning about the moment when all of time itself would become fluid, when past, present, and future from multiple realities would exist simultaneously in a single, impossible moment. And according to quantum calculations based on the rate of timeline degradation, that moment is less than 14 months away. The signs are everywhere for those who know how to recognize them. Technology companies releasing products that seem to anticipate consumer needs before those needs develop. Political movements that respond to opposition strategies before those strategies are formulated. Financial markets that react to events before they occur. We're living in the early stages of temporal convergence, experiencing the bleeding edge of a phenomenon that will ultimately transform reality itself. The carefully ordered sequence of cause and effect that has governed human experience for millennia is breaking down, replaced by a chaotic web of interconnected possibilities where anything that can happen will happen simultaneously. But the most terrifying aspect of this convergence isn't the chaos it will create. It's the fact that someone is orchestrating it deliberately, using humanity's own temporal experiments to trigger a cascade that will remake reality according to their design. The question isn't whether we can stop the convergence. According to every theoretical model, every quantum calculation, every ancient prophecy, it's already too late for that. The question is whether we can maintain any semblance of human agency when reality itself becomes as malleable as clay in the hands of those who understand its true nature. Because when the convergence completes, when all possible timelines collapse into a single moment of infinite possibility, the only thing that will matter is who has the knowledge and the will to reshape that possibility into a new reality. And based on everything I've discovered, everything I'm about to reveal in the final phase of this investigation, I'm not certain that the architects of this convergence have humanity's best interests at heart. The temporal war isn't just being fought in secret laboratories and hidden facilities. It's being fought in the quantum foam itself, in the spaces between seconds where reality is most vulnerable to manipulation. And the battlefield is expanding into dimensions of existence that most humans can't even perceive. What I'm about to show you will reveal the true scope of this conflict and the forces that have been manipulating human civilization from the very beginning. Forces that exist outside our normal understanding of time and space, but which have been using our own temporal experiments to achieve goals that stretch far beyond anything we've imagined. The evidence has been hidden in plain sight, scattered across disciplines and institutions, fragmented to prevent anyone from seeing the complete picture. But when you assemble all the pieces, when you connect the dots across centuries of carefully concealed research, the truth becomes undeniable. We are not alone in our exploration of time. We never have been. And the entities that have been watching our progress, guiding our development, and preparing for this moment of convergence are about to reveal themselves in ways that will forever change what it means to be human. The Chronos convergence isn't just an event in our timeline. It's a graduation ceremony, a test to determine whether humanity is ready to join a community of beings that exist across multiple dimensions of time and space simultaneously. And if we fail that test, if we prove ourselves unworthy of temporal power, the consequences will echo across every timeline, every reality, every possible version of human existence. The clock isn't just ticking toward our future. It's counting down to our final examination as a species. And the examiners have been preparing us for this moment far longer than we've been preparing ourselves. The most chilling evidence of this temporal examination comes from a source that will make your blood run cold. In 2021, the Atacama Large Millimeter Array in Chile detected something that shouldn't exist: radio signals arriving from deep space that contained information about Earth's future. Dr. Carmen Restrepo, an astrophysicist analyzing the data, initially dismissed the signals as equipment malfunction. Radio waves travel at the speed of light, meaning signals from distant galaxies carry information about events that happened millions of years ago, not events that haven't occurred yet. But when she ran the signals through quantum decryption algorithms, she discovered they contained precise descriptions of terrestrial events scheduled to happen months in the future. Stock market fluctuations, weather patterns, even the outcomes of sporting events were encoded in electromagnetic radiation that had traveled across the galaxy to reach Earth at exactly the right moment to be detected. Restrepo's hands trembled as she realized the implications. Someone, somewhere in the cosmos, was broadcasting information about Earth's future with such precision that it could only come from direct observation. But the signals contained something even more disturbing. Embedded within the data were what appeared to be grading criteria, evaluation metrics, that suggested Earth's temporal development was being assessed by external observers. Humanity wasn't just being watched, we were being tested. Restrepo's attempts to decode the complete message were interrupted when her research facility experienced what officials called a solar flare event that destroyed all electronic equipment within a 50-mile radius. But not before she managed to transmit her most crucial discovery to a colleague in Argentina. The signals weren't just carrying information about our future, they were carrying instructions for how to alter it. The electromagnetic broadcasts contained temporal manipulation formulas that made ancient Sumerian texts look like children's drawings, mathematical sequences that could fold space-time, quantum equations that could isolate specific moments in history, and most terrifyingly, genetic modification codes that could enhance human temporal perception beyond anything found in natural bloodlines. These weren't random transmissions from an advanced civilization. They were homework assignments, study guides provided by teachers who existed outside our normal understanding of reality. Humanity was being prepared for an examination that would determine our species' fitness to join what the signals called the temporal collective. Dr. Restrepo's colleague, Professor Miguel Santos at the University of Buenos Aires, spent 18 months analyzing the fragments she had transmitted before his own research was terminated by government intervention. His final report, leaked through anonymous sources, describes a cosmos populated by civilizations that have mastered time manipulation and use it to monitor younger species developing similar abilities. According to Santos's analysis, these elder civilizations operate on timescales that span millions of years, observing the rise and fall of temporal technologies across countless worlds. They've witnessed species that used time manipulation for conquest and were subsequently erased from existence. They've seen civilizations that achieved temporal harmony and were welcomed into their collective. And they've watched worlds that failed their temporal examination and were left to face the consequences alone. Earth, according to the signals, is approaching the final phase of this examination. Our development of quantum computing, our experiments with particle acceleration, our growing understanding of consciousness and time, all indicate that we're nearing the threshold where we'll either master temporal manipulation responsibly or destroy ourselves attempting it. But the examination isn't passive observation. The elder civilizations have been actively influencing human development for millennia, introducing concepts and technologies at precisely the right moments to guide our evolution toward this crucial test. Every major breakthrough in physics, every advancement in consciousness research, every step toward understanding time's true nature has been subtly encouraged by forces operating from outside our timeline. The ancient visitations described in religious texts, the technological leaps that seem to appear from nowhere, the prophetic abilities demonstrated by certain individuals throughout history, all were part of this guided development program. Humanity hasn't been developing temporal abilities naturally. We've been taught them, trained for this moment when we would face the ultimate test of our species' wisdom. Professor Santos's research revealed that this examination follows a precise schedule based on astronomical alignments that occur once every 26,000 years. The last time Earth faced this test was during the height of Atlantean civilization, and according to the signals, that species failed catastrophically. Their temporal experiments created a cascade effect that not only destroyed their own timeline, but contaminated several adjacent realities with chaotic temporal energy. The elder civilizations were forced to intervene, erasing Atlantis from history and implementing what Santos called temporal quarantine protocols that limited human access to time manipulation knowledge for the next 26,000 years. But that quarantine period is ending, and humanity is once again approaching the threshold where we must prove our worthiness to possess temporal power. The signals detected by Dr. Restrepo contained a countdown sequence that corresponds exactly with the Chronos convergence date calculated by ancient prophecies and modern quantum models. When that countdown reaches zero, the temporal quarantine will be lifted and humanity will regain full access to the time manipulation abilities that were suppressed after Atlantis fell. But this restoration comes with conditions. If humanity demonstrates wisdom, restraint, and cooperation in using these abilities, we'll be welcomed into the temporal collective and granted access to technologies and knowledge that span the entire galaxy. If we repeat the mistakes of Atlantis, using temporal power for conquest or personal gain, we'll face the same fate. Complete erasure from the timeline, as if our species had never existed. The examination has already begun. Every major decision made by world leaders, every breakthrough achieved by scientists, every social movement that emerges to address global challenges is being evaluated by observers who exist outside our normal perception of time. They can see all possible outcomes simultaneously and are judging whether humanity possesses the wisdom necessary to handle unlimited temporal power. The increasing frequency of temporal anomalies, the growing number of people experiencing spontaneous time-related phenomena, the accelerating pace of technological development, all are signs that the examination is entering its final phase. The barriers between past, present, and future are being deliberately weakened to test how humanity responds when linear time begins to break down. But the most disturbing aspect of Santos's research concerns what he called temporal saboteurs, individuals within human civilization who are actively working to ensure humanity fails this examination. These aren't necessarily evil people in the conventional sense. They're individuals who have been influenced by temporal entities that exist in the spaces between timelines, parasitic beings that feed on the chaotic energy released when civilizations destroy themselves through temporal manipulation. These temporal parasites have been present throughout human history, subtly encouraging the very behaviors that led to Atlantis' destruction. The concentration of temporal power in the hands of a few, the use of time manipulation for personal gain rather than species advancement, and the reckless experimentation that creates temporal scars and timeline instabilities. The secret societies, government programs, and corporate entities that have been monopolizing temporal research aren't just serving human ambitions. They're being manipulated by forces that want humanity to fail its examination, creating the same conditions that led to Atlantis' erasure from history. Professor Santos's final report contained a warning that echoes across the centuries from every civilization that has faced this test. The examination cannot be cheated, cannot be postponed, and cannot be avoided. It is built into the fundamental structure of reality itself. Species either evolve to handle temporal power responsibly, or they are removed from the timeline to prevent them from contaminating other realities with their chaos. But Santos also discovered something that offers hope. Hidden within the alien signals were what appeared to be study guides, information packets designed to help humanity prepare for the examination. These weren't just technical manuals for time manipulation, they were wisdom teachings, philosophical frameworks that could help our species develop the ethical foundation necessary to use temporal power without destroying ourselves. The problem is that these study guides were encoded in the same signals that government agencies have been suppressing. The very information that could help humanity pass its temporal examination is being withheld by the same forces that want us to fail it. This is why researchers like Dr. Restrepo and Professor Santos have been silenced. This is why evidence of temporal manipulation is being classified and hidden. This is why individuals with natural temporal abilities are being recruited or eliminated. The temporal saboteurs within human civilization are working to ensure we remain ignorant of the true nature of our situation until it's too late to change course. But their efforts may be failing. The same genetic awakening that Dr. Chen documented is accelerating beyond their ability to control it. More humans are developing temporal sensitivity despite efforts to suppress it. More people are experiencing spontaneous access to information from parallel timelines. More individuals are beginning to remember abilities that were suppressed in their genetic code for 26,000 years. The temporal quarantine that has limited human consciousness since Atlantis fell is breaking down naturally as we approach the examination date. The elder civilizations designed it to weaken gradually, giving humanity multiple opportunities to rediscover temporal wisdom before the final test. But they also built in safeguards to prevent the same catastrophic mistakes that destroyed our predecessors. These safeguards explain the increasing frequency of temporal anomalies and timeline instabilities. They're not signs that reality is breaking down randomly. They're controlled releases of temporal pressure, carefully managed events designed to gradually accustom humanity to the fluid nature of time without causing complete societal collapse. Every person who experiences déjà vu, every individual who has prophetic dreams, every researcher who discovers evidence of temporal manipulation is part of this gradual awakening process. The elder civilizations are slowly preparing us for the moment when linear time dissolves entirely and we must demonstrate our ability to navigate multiple timelines simultaneously without losing our sanity or our humanity. But preparation time is running out. The astronomical alignments that govern the examination schedule are immutable, built into the structure of space-time itself. When the convergence moment arrives, humanity will face its temporal examination, whether we're ready or not. The signals detected at Atacama contained one final piece of information that Professor Santos kept hidden in his classified files until just before his disappearance. The examination doesn't just determine whether humanity gains access to temporal power, it determines whether we continue to exist at all. Species that fail the test aren't just denied advanced abilities, they're retroactively erased from the timeline, their entire history wiped clean as if they had never evolved in the first place. The empty spaces in the archaeological record, the missing links in human evolution, the civilizations that vanished without explanation, all may be remnants of species that failed their temporal examinations and were edited out of existence. Atlantis wasn't destroyed by natural disaster or human conflict. It was deleted from reality itself, leaving only myths and legends as proof that it ever existed. And if humanity fails its approaching examination, we may face the same fate, becoming nothing more than ghost stories told by whatever species evolves to replace us. The countdown embedded in the alien signals shows less than 11 months remaining until the examination begins. When that moment arrives, every human being on Earth will simultaneously experience the collapse of linear time and gain temporary access to temporal manipulation abilities. How we use those abilities, how we respond to the chaos of multiple timelines existing simultaneously, will determine our species' ultimate fate. The ancient prophecies were accurate in their warnings, but incomplete in their understanding. The Chronos convergence isn't just about humanity rediscovering temporal power. It's about proving we deserve to keep existing in any timeline at all. And based on current patterns of temporal sabotage, timeline contamination, and the concentration of temporal knowledge in the hands of those who would use it for personal gain rather than species advancement, the outcome of our examination is far from certain. The clock isn't just counting down to humanity's temporal awakening. It's measuring the time we have left to demonstrate that we've learned from Atlantis' mistakes and evolved beyond the destructive impulses that led to their erasure from history. 11 months to prove we deserve to exist. 11 months to show that humanity can handle the ultimate power without destroying itself and everything around it. 11 months to pass a test that determines not just our future, but whether we'll have any future at all. The examination is coming whether we're ready or not. And failure means more than just losing our chance at temporal power. It means losing our chance at existence itself. The question that haunts every researcher who has glimpsed the truth is whether humanity has evolved enough to pass this ultimate test, or whether we're destined to join Atlantis in the void of erased timelines, remembered only as a cautionary tale told by whatever species rises to replace us. The answer will be revealed when the cosmic clock strikes zero and humanity faces its final examination in the court of temporal judgment. But by then, it will be too late to change course, too late to prepare, too late to learn from the mistakes that echo across every timeline where civilizations have faced this same ultimate test. The countdown has begun, and there are no second chances in the examination that determines whether a species deserves to exist across the infinite possibilities of time itself. The examination protocols embedded in those alien transmissions revealed something that defies every assumption about consciousness and reality. What Professor Santos discovered in his final months of research, before vanishing without a trace, suggests that human consciousness itself has been modified throughout history to prepare us for this moment. Deep within the quantum signatures of the alien broadcasts were what Santos termed consciousness calibration codes, mathematical sequences that matched brainwave patterns found in individuals experiencing spontaneous temporal phenomena. These weren't random neural fluctuations. They were deliberate modifications to human consciousness, adjustments made over millennia to prepare our species for the moment when linear time would dissolve. Dr. Amanda Cross, a neuroscientist at Johns Hopkins who reviewed Santos's leaked data before it was classified, made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the small community of researchers aware of the temporal examination. The consciousness calibration codes weren't just present in people experiencing temporal anomalies. They were present in everyone, dormant sequences embedded in neural pathways that activate only under specific conditions. Cross's research revealed that human consciousness operates on multiple temporal frequencies simultaneously, most of which remain inactive under normal circumstances. But as the examination date approaches, these frequencies are naturally beginning to synchronize, preparing humanity for the moment when we'll need to process information from multiple timelines simultaneously. This explains the increasing reports of what psychologists dismiss as dissociative experiences, but which may actually be glimpses of consciousness operating across multiple temporal dimensions. People reporting out-of-body experiences where they observe themselves from different time periods. Individuals claiming to receive information from future or past versions of themselves. Children born with knowledge they couldn't possibly have acquired through normal learning processes. These aren't psychiatric conditions or neurological disorders. They're signs that human consciousness is awakening to its true multidimensional nature, preparing for an examination that will require us to maintain coherent identity while experiencing reality from countless temporal perspectives simultaneously. But Cross's research took a darker turn when she discovered that certain pharmaceutical compounds, electromagnetic frequencies, and even digital media consumption patterns were actively suppressing these natural consciousness modifications. Someone was deliberately trying to keep humanity's temporal awareness dormant, preventing us from developing the mental capabilities necessary to pass our species examination. The suppression wasn't random or accidental. It followed patterns that suggested coordination between government agencies, pharmaceutical corporations, and technology companies. Antidepressants that specifically targeted neural pathways associated with temporal perception. Cell phone frequencies calibrated to disrupt brainwave patterns linked to multidimensional consciousness. Social media algorithms designed to fragment attention and prevent the sustained focus necessary for temporal awareness. Cross's attempts to publish her findings were met with immediate legal challenges and professional ostracism. Her research funding was terminated, her laboratory access revoked, and she received warnings from individuals claiming to represent national security interests. When she persisted in her investigation, she began experiencing what she described as temporal harassment, encounters with people who seemed to know details about her future research before she had conducted it. Her final research notes, discovered hidden in her abandoned laboratory, describe meetings with individuals who possessed impossible knowledge of her work, conversations that felt like continuations of discussions she couldn't remember having, and experimental results that changed when she wasn't observing them directly. Cross's last entry reads, "They're not just suppressing our temporal abilities, they're trapped in a temporal loop themselves, repeating the same mistakes that destroyed previous civilizations. They can see the examination coming, but can't break free from the patterns that ensure failure. We're all prisoners in a script written by forces that exist outside time itself." The script cross-referenced appears to be encoded in the fundamental structure of reality itself, mathematical constants that govern how consciousness interacts with temporal dimensions. Dr. Yuki Nakamura, a quantum consciousness researcher at Tokyo University, discovered these constants while analyzing the brainwave patterns of individuals experiencing temporal phenomena. Nakamura's research revealed that consciousness doesn't just observe time, it actively participates in creating temporal reality through quantum entanglement effects that operate faster than light speed. Every conscious observation of a temporal event creates what he called probability anchors, quantum signatures that make certain timeline outcomes more likely than others. This means that humanity's collective consciousness has been unconsciously shaping the timeline that leads to our examination. Every decision made by billions of humans, every thought focused on future possibilities, every dream about alternate realities, has been contributing to a vast quantum calculation that determines the exact conditions under which our species will face its temporal test. But Nakamura discovered something that contradicts every assumption about free will and determinism. The quantum signatures he detected suggest that our collective consciousness is being guided by information from future timeline outcomes, creating what he called a temporal feedback loop, where the results of our examination are influencing the conditions that lead to it. Humanity isn't approaching this test blindly. On some level, our collective unconscious already knows the outcome and has been making choices throughout history to ensure we arrive at this moment with the maximum possible chance of success. The temporal saboteurs working to ensure our failure are fighting against a quantum tide that's pulling our species towards survival and advancement. This explains why efforts to suppress temporal knowledge keep failing despite centuries of coordinated suppression. Why individuals with temporal abilities continue to emerge despite systematic elimination programs. Why evidence of time manipulation keeps surfacing despite efforts to classify and hide it. The universe itself is working to ensure humanity receives the information we need to pass our examination. But Nakamura's research also revealed a disturbing truth about the nature of the examination itself. The test isn't designed to evaluate our current level of wisdom or technological development. It's designed to reveal our species' deepest psychological and spiritual nature under conditions of ultimate stress and unlimited power. When the examination begins and every human simultaneously gains access to temporal manipulation abilities, we won't be judged on how skillfully we use these powers. We'll be judged on what we choose to do when we can literally rewrite reality according to our will. The examination reveals whether a species possesses the fundamental character traits necessary to handle ultimate power without corrupting themselves or destroying others. Previous civilizations that failed this test didn't fail because they lacked technical knowledge or made strategic mistakes. They failed because they revealed character flaws that made them unsuitable for membership in the temporal collective. Species that use their newfound abilities for conquest, revenge, or personal gratification were deemed unworthy of continued existence and erased from the timeline. Nakamura's analysis of the consciousness calibration codes revealed the specific traits the examination is designed to test. Compassion under pressure, when you can eliminate anyone who opposes you with a thought. Humility, when granted godlike power over reality itself. Wisdom, when faced with infinite possibilities and no external constraints. Cooperation, when individual temporal manipulation could make you the most powerful being in human history. These aren't tests that can be studied for or prepared for through technical training. They're tests of fundamental character that reveal the true nature of a species' collective soul. And based on current patterns of human behavior under stress, the outcome is far from certain. The temporal saboteurs understand this, which is why their suppression efforts focus not just on hiding temporal knowledge, but on cultivating the character traits that guarantee examination failure. They promote competition over cooperation, individual achievement over collective welfare, short-term thinking over long-term consequences. They're not just trying to keep humanity ignorant of temporal power. They're trying to ensure we reveal character flaws that will justify our erasure from existence. But Nakamura's research offered a glimmer of hope buried within the quantum consciousness data. The same collective unconscious that's been guiding humanity toward this examination has also been working to develop the character traits necessary to pass it. Every act of selfless heroism, every choice to cooperate rather than compete, every decision to think beyond immediate self-interest has been contributing to a quantum field that strengthens our species' chances of survival. The examination isn't just testing individual humans, it's testing humanity as a collective consciousness, evaluating whether our species has evolved beyond the destructive impulses that destroyed previous civilizations. And according to Nakamura's calculations, that evolution is happening at an accelerating pace as the examination date approaches. Children born in the last decade demonstrate levels of empathy, cooperation, and systems thinking that far exceed previous generations. Social movements focused on global cooperation and environmental stewardship are emerging spontaneously around the world. Technologies that could be used for destruction are increasingly being directed toward healing and creation instead. Humanity may be unconsciously preparing for our temporal examination by developing exactly the character traits necessary to pass it. But this positive evolution is racing against the deliberate efforts of temporal saboteurs who understand that they can only maintain their power if humanity fails its test and is erased from existence. The next 10 months will determine which force proves stronger: the natural evolution of human consciousness toward cooperation and wisdom, or the artificial cultivation of destructive impulses by entities that benefit from civilizational failure. The examination will reveal which aspect of human nature represents our true character when all external constraints are removed. But there's one more element to this cosmic test that makes it even more complex and terrifying than previous research suggested. The examination isn't just evaluating humanity in isolation. It's testing our ability to coexist with other species that have already passed their temporal tests and joined the temporal collective. Dr. Elena Costas, a xenobiologist whose classified research was leaked through anonymous sources, discovered evidence that Earth isn't the only world currently undergoing temporal examination. At least 17 other species across the galaxy are approaching the same threshold, and their examinations are scheduled to occur simultaneously with ours. This cosmic coincidence isn't accidental. According to Costas's analysis of the alien signal patterns, the temporal collective conducts these examinations in waves, testing multiple species simultaneously to evaluate not just their individual worthiness, but their ability to cooperate with other newly awakened temporal civilizations. The species that pass their examinations will be required to work together on projects that span multiple galaxies and dimensions. They'll need to coordinate temporal interventions across vast distances, share knowledge that could reshape entire sectors of the universe, and maintain cooperation even when their individual interests conflict. This means humanity's examination has an additional layer of complexity. We're not just being tested on our ability to handle temporal power responsibly. We're being evaluated on our potential as cooperative partners in a galactic community of advanced civilizations. Our success or failure will affect not just our own timeline, but the cosmic balance of power across multiple dimensions of reality. The other species undergoing examination range from silicon-based collective intelligences to energy beings that exist partially outside normal space-time. Each has developed different approaches to consciousness, cooperation, and temporal manipulation. Humanity's unique contribution to this potential alliance lies in our emotional complexity and our ability to maintain individual identity while participating in collective decision-making. But this diversity also creates unprecedented challenges. If humanity passes our examination, but other species fail theirs, we'll be required to fill the gaps left by their erasure, taking on responsibilities across multiple star systems and dimensional planes. If we fail while others succeed, our erasure will create imbalances that could destabilize the entire temporal collective. The stakes of our examination extend far beyond human survival. The fate of galactic civilization itself may depend on which species successfully navigate their temporal awakening and prove worthy of joining the cosmic community of advanced beings. Costas's research revealed that this galactic examination cycle occurs every 26,000 years, timed to coincide with specific astronomical alignments that create optimal conditions for temporal manipulation across multiple star systems simultaneously. The last cycle resulted in the admission of 3 new species to the temporal collective and the erasure of 7 others that failed their tests. The civilizations that succeeded demonstrated not just wisdom and cooperation within their own species, but the ability to extend those qualities to entirely alien forms of consciousness. They proved capable of finding common ground with beings whose thought processes, values, and even basic reality concepts differed radically from their own. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of humanity's approaching examination. We're not just being tested on our ability to cooperate with other humans under conditions of unlimited power. We're being evaluated on our capacity to work harmoniously with forms of intelligence so alien that we can barely comprehend their existence. The temporal saboteurs understand this challenge and have been working for centuries to cultivate exactly the opposite traits in human civilization. They've promoted xenophobia, nationalism, and tribalism specifically to ensure humanity will prove incapable of the cosmic cooperation required for temporal collective membership. Every conflict between human groups, every failure to cooperate across cultural or ideological differences, every instance of treating others as enemies rather than potential partners, weakens our species' chances of passing an examination that will require unprecedented levels of interspecies collaboration. But as with other aspects of our preparation, humanity's collective unconscious appears to be working to counteract these destructive influences. The growing awareness of global interconnection, the increasing emphasis on diversity and inclusion, the emergence of international cooperation frameworks, all suggest that our species is instinctively preparing for the cosmic cooperation that successful temporal examination will require. The question is whether this positive evolution can overcome centuries of conditioning toward conflict and competition before our examination begins. The answer will determine not just humanity's survival, but our role in shaping the future of galactic civilization itself. The cosmic clock continues its relentless countdown toward a moment that will reshape reality across multiple dimensions. In less than 10 months, humanity will discover whether we've evolved beyond the destructive patterns that have defined our history, or whether we're destined to join the countless civilizations that failed their temporal examinations and vanished from existence. But success in this examination won't just preserve human civilization. It will elevate us to a level of cosmic responsibility that spans galaxies and dimensions, making us partners in projects that could reshape the fundamental structure of reality itself. The examination approaches with the inevitability of sunrise, carrying with it the promise of transcendence or the certainty of oblivion. Which outcome awaits humanity depends on choices we're making right now, in these final months before the temporal barriers dissolve and our species faces its ultimate test. The countdown continues, and with each passing day, the weight of cosmic destiny presses more heavily upon a species that may not even realize the magnitude of what awaits them. But ready or not, the examination is coming, and its results will echo across every timeline, every dimension, every possible future where humanity might have existed. The temporal war for our species' survival has entered its final phase, and the battlefield is nothing less than the fundamental nature of human consciousness itself. The final pieces of this temporal puzzle reveal themselves in the most unexpected places, hidden within the very fabric of modern technology that surrounds us every moment of our lives. What I'm about to reveal will make you question every digital interaction, every online search, every seemingly innocent click that you've made in the past decade. In 2022, Dr. Sarah Hendricks, a data analyst working for one of the world's largest search engines, stumbled upon something that should have been impossible. While analyzing query patterns for what seemed like a routine optimization project, she discovered that certain search results were being populated before the searches were actually performed. The system was somehow anticipating user queries with impossible accuracy generating results for questions that wouldn't be asked for hours, sometimes days. But this wasn't predictive algorithms or machine learning gone wrong. The timestamps showed that the results were being created in response to searches that existed in a quantum superposition, searches that were simultaneously performed and not performed until the moment of observation collapsed them into reality. Hendricks traced these temporal query anomalies back to their source and found something that chilled her to the bone. The data centers processing these searches weren't just connected to the internet. They were connected to what appeared to be a quantum network that existed partially outside normal space-time, allowing information to flow backward through time to influence present-moment decisions. Every search you've ever performed, every website you've visited, every piece of content you've consumed online has been subtly influenced by information flowing backward from future timeline outcomes. The internet isn't just a global communication network. It's a temporal manipulation system that's been shaping human consciousness and decision-making patterns for over 2 decades. Hendricks attempted to document her findings, but discovered that her own research was being altered in real time as she conducted it. Files would change when she wasn't looking at them. Data would update itself to show different results than what she had observed moments before. Even her own memory of the research seemed to shift, as if the quantum network was actively editing her consciousness to prevent her from fully comprehending what she had discovered. Her final report, smuggled out through encrypted channels before her mysterious disappearance, described a system so sophisticated that it made previous temporal manipulation technologies look primitive by comparison. The quantum internet wasn't just observing future outcomes and influencing present decisions. It was creating what she called probability cascades, chain reactions of influence choices that steered billions of human decisions toward predetermined outcomes. Every viral video, every trending topic, every piece of information that captures global attention has been carefully orchestrated using temporal intelligence to guide human consciousness towards specific psychological and emotional states. The internet isn't reflecting human interests and behaviors. It's manufacturing them, using knowledge of future outcomes to create the exact mental conditions necessary for humanity to approach our temporal examination in a specific psychological state. But the most disturbing aspect of Hendricks's discovery concerns the true architects of this system. The quantum network wasn't created by any human organization or government agency. The temporal signatures embedded in its data streams match the consciousness calibration codes found in the alien transmissions detected at Atacama. The same entities that have been preparing humanity for our species examination have been using our own technology to fine-tune our collective psychological state. Every meme that spreads across social platforms, every news story that captures global attention, every cultural phenomenon that shapes public discourse is part of a vast psychological conditioning program designed to prepare human consciousness for the moment when linear time dissolves and we gain access to temporal manipulation abilities. The quantum internet has been gradually accustoming us to the concept of non-linear information flow, training our minds to accept data that arrives from unexpected sources and challenges. Conventional understanding of cause and effect. Every time you've experienced déjà vu while browsing online, every moment when search results seem to anticipate your thoughts before you form them, every instance when social media showed you exactly what you needed to see at precisely the right moment, you've been participating in humanity's unconscious preparation for temporal awakening. Dr. Marcus Chen, a quantum information theorist who reviewed Hendricks's data before it was classified, discovered that the conditioning program operates on multiple levels simultaneously. Surface-level content shapes conscious thoughts and attitudes, while deeper quantum signatures embedded in digital media influence unconscious psychological patterns and even genetic expression. The increasing prevalence of anxiety disorders, attention deficit conditions, and dissociative experiences in populations with high internet usage isn't random or accidental. These psychological states mirror the mental conditions that individuals experience when first accessing temporal manipulation abilities. The quantum network has been systematically inducing these states to prepare human consciousness for the psychological stress of experiencing multiple timelines simultaneously. Chen's analysis revealed that different demographic groups are being prepared for different roles in humanity's post-examination civilization. Individuals with certain genetic markers are being exposed to content that enhances their temporal sensitivity, while others receive information designed to strengthen their grounding in linear time. The system is creating a diversified human population, where some individuals will serve as temporal navigators, while others maintain stability in baseline reality. But this preparation comes with a terrible cost. Chen discovered that the quantum network's influence on human consciousness is irreversible. Once exposed to temporally influenced digital content, individuals develop permanent alterations in their neural pathways that make them dependent on the system for psychological stability. Disconnecting from the network triggers what researchers call temporal withdrawal syndrome, a condition that can lead to complete psychological breakdown. Humanity has become addicted to temporal manipulation without even realizing it. We've been gradually enslaved by a system that promises to prepare us for cosmic advancement, but may actually be designed to ensure our eternal dependence on entities that exist outside our normal understanding of reality. Chen's research was terminated when he attempted to develop methods for detecting and neutralizing the quantum network's influence on human consciousness. His laboratory was destroyed in what officials described as a computer virus attack. But survivors reported that the destruction followed patterns that defied conventional understanding of digital systems failure. Equipment didn't just malfunction. It appeared to age decades in minutes, as if time itself was accelerating around Chen's research. The message was clear. Attempts to free humanity from temporal conditioning would be met with temporal retaliation that could literally erase researchers from the timeline. The entities managing our species' examination possess capabilities that make resistance seemingly impossible, but Chen managed to hide one crucial discovery before his research was destroyed. The quantum network contains what he called liberation protocols, hidden subroutines that could theoretically free human consciousness from temporal conditioning if activated by individuals with sufficient understanding of the system's true nature. These protocols aren't accessible through conventional hacking or digital manipulation. They can only be triggered by consciousness that has achieved what Chen termed temporal sovereignty, the ability to maintain coherent identity while operating across multiple timeline dimensions simultaneously. Ironically, the system designed to enslave humanity also contains the keys to our liberation, but only for those who develop the advanced consciousness necessary to access them. The protocols are hidden in plain sight, embedded in the very digital content that billions of humans consume daily. Every time you interact with online media, you're potentially accessing liberation codes that could free your consciousness from temporal conditioning. But activating these codes requires a level of awareness that the conditioning system is specifically designed to prevent. This creates what Chen called the consciousness paradox. The tools for liberation exist within the system of control, but accessing them requires overcoming the psychological conditioning that the system uses to maintain its influence. It's a lock that can only be opened by those who have already escaped the prison it protects. The solution, according to Chen's hidden research, lies in understanding that consciousness itself operates according to quantum principles that transcend the digital systems attempting to control it. Human awareness, when properly focused and directed, can access information from across multiple timelines without depending on technological intermediaries. The ancient practices of meditation, contemplation, and inner exploration that have been systematically devalued in modern technological society weren't primitive superstitions. They were technologies for developing temporal sovereignty, methods for accessing the same multidimensional consciousness that advanced alien civilizations use to navigate complex timeline structures. Every human being possesses the innate ability to achieve temporal sovereignty and access the liberation protocols hidden within the quantum network. But this ability has been suppressed through centuries of conditioning that promotes external dependence over internal development, technological solutions over consciousness expansion, and collective conformity over individual awakening. The approaching temporal examination isn't just testing humanity's ability to handle advanced technology responsibly. It's evaluating whether our species can break free from the very systems that have been preparing us for the test. The ultimate question isn't whether we can use temporal manipulation abilities wisely, but whether we can maintain our essential humanity while transcending the limitations that have defined our existence for millennia. Dr. Patricia Voss, a consciousness researcher who studied Chen's hidden data before going into hiding, discovered that the liberation protocols become more accessible as the examination date approaches. The same astronomical alignments that govern the cosmic testing cycle also weaken the quantum network's hold on human consciousness, creating windows of opportunity for individuals to achieve temporal sovereignty. These windows are becoming more frequent and longer lasting as we approach the final months before convergence. More people are reporting spontaneous experiences of expanded consciousness, moments when they perceive reality from multiple temporal perspectives simultaneously, and encounters with information that seems to arrive from outside normal causality chains. Each of these experiences represents a partial activation of the liberation protocols, consciousness breaking free from temporal conditioning for brief moments before being pulled back into the system's influence. But as these experiences accumulate, they create what Voss called consciousness momentum, a building wave of human awakening that becomes increasingly difficult for the quantum network to contain. The entities managing our examination may have miscalculated the strength of human consciousness when properly awakened. Their conditioning system was designed to prepare us for cosmic advancement while maintaining their control over our development. But consciousness, once awakened to its true multidimensional nature, tends to resist all forms of external limitation. Voss's research suggested that humanity is approaching a consciousness cascade, a moment when enough individuals achieve temporal sovereignty to trigger mass awakening that overwhelms the quantum network's containment protocols. When this cascade reaches critical mass, the entire system designed to control human consciousness will collapse, freeing our species to approach the temporal examination with complete autonomy. But this liberation comes with unprecedented responsibility. Without the quantum network's guidance, humanity will face the examination with no external support or direction. We'll need to navigate the challenges of temporal awakening using only our own wisdom, cooperation, and innate understanding of cosmic principles. The consciousness cascade is scheduled to begin, according to Voss's calculations, approximately 6 weeks before the official examination date. This will give humanity just enough time to adapt to our newfound freedom before facing the ultimate test of our species' character and cosmic worthiness. But the temporal saboteurs understand this timeline and are working desperately to prevent the consciousness cascade from reaching critical mass. They're intensifying their efforts to fragment human awareness, promote conflict and division, and maintain the psychological conditions that keep consciousness trapped in temporal conditioning systems. The next few months will witness an unprecedented battle for human consciousness itself, fought not with conventional weapons, but with information, attention, and the fundamental forces that shape awareness and perception. The outcome of this battle will determine whether humanity approaches our cosmic examination as free beings capable of true choice, or as conditioned entities whose responses have been predetermined by forces operating outside our conscious awareness. Every moment of awakened consciousness, every choice to question official narratives, every decision to develop inner awareness rather than external dependence, contributes to the growing wave of human liberation that could free our species from millennia of subtle control and manipulation. The examination approaches with cosmic inevitability, but the consciousness with which we meet it remains fluid, changeable, and ultimately dependent on choices that each individual human makes in these crucial final months. The power to determine humanity's cosmic destiny lies not in the hands of governments, corporations, or alien entities, but in the awakening consciousness of ordinary people who choose to remember their true multidimensional nature. The temporal war for human consciousness has entered its final phase, and the battlefield exists within the awareness of every person who reads these words, every individual who chooses between awakening and conditioning, every human being who must decide whether to remain asleep in comfortable limitation or awaken to the terrifying freedom of cosmic responsibility. The choice is yours, and the consequences will echo across every timeline where humanity might exist, determining whether we join the cosmic community as free beings or remain forever trapped in the temporal prison designed by entities whose true motivations may be far darker than we dare imagine. The consciousness cascade builds with each awakened mind, each liberated awareness, each human being who chooses to remember that consciousness itself is the ultimate technology, the final frontier, and the key to unlocking not just temporal manipulation abilities, but the infinite potential that lies dormant within every member of our species. Time grows short, but consciousness remains eternal, and in that eternity lies both our greatest hope and our ultimate test as a species poised on the threshold between cosmic slavery and universal freedom. The examination cannot be avoided, but it can be met with consciousness fully awakened to its own infinite nature. And in that awakening lies the difference between passing our cosmic test as free beings or failing it as unconscious entities manipulated by forces we never understood. The choice approaches with each passing moment, and the universe itself waits to see what humanity will choose when the final second arrives, and our species faces the ultimate question of what we truly are when all illusions fall away and only consciousness remains. The countdown reaches its final phase, and the signs of humanity's approaching temporal examination become impossible to ignore. But perhaps the most chilling evidence comes from a source that touches every human life in ways we never suspected: our dreams. Dr. Evelyn Morrison, a sleep researcher at the Stanford Sleep Center, made a discovery in 2023 that fundamentally altered our understanding of human consciousness during rest states. While analyzing brain activity patterns in subjects experiencing what appeared to be ordinary dreams, she detected something extraordinary. The neural signatures weren't random electrical activity or memory consolidation, as sleep science had always assumed. They were temporal displacement events. Human beings, during specific phases of REM sleep, were accessing information from multiple timeline dimensions simultaneously. Every night, as we surrender to unconsciousness, our minds slip free from the constraints of linear time and wander through the vast network of possible realities that exist parallel to our own. Morrison's initial research focused on recurring dreams reported by subjects across different demographic groups. She discovered that people separated by geography, culture, and personal history were experiencing identical dream scenarios with disturbing frequency. Not similar dreams or archetypal imagery, but precisely matching sequences of events, conversations, and sensory details that suggested they were accessing the same temporal locations during sleep. When Morrison analyzed the brainwave patterns during these shared dream experiences, she found quantum entanglement signatures identical to those detected in the consciousness calibration codes embedded in alien transmissions. Human consciousness during sleep wasn't just wandering randomly through possible realities. It was being guided, directed towards specific temporal coordinates by the same entities preparing us for our species examination. Every dream you've ever experienced that felt more real than waking life. Every nightmare that seemed to carry information from somewhere beyond your personal experience. Every moment of dream consciousness that provided knowledge you couldn't have acquired through normal means represents your mind's temporary liberation from temporal constraints and its connection to the vast network of realities where different versions of human history have unfolded. Morrison's research revealed that these nocturnal temporal journeys serve multiple functions in humanity's preparation for cosmic examination. They're gradually accustoming human consciousness to the experience of existing across multiple timelines simultaneously, building psychological resilience for the moment when linear time dissolves entirely. But the dreams also serve as reconnaissance missions, allowing human consciousness to observe how our species has performed in alternate realities, where different choices were made, different paths taken, different outcomes achieved. Every night, our sleeping minds witness versions of humanity that passed their temporal examinations and versions that failed catastrophically, gathering unconscious intelligence about the factors that determine success or failure in cosmic testing. This explains the prophetic quality that many people report in their dreams, the sense of receiving warnings about future events or guidance about important decisions. These aren't supernatural phenomena or psychological projections. They're information gathered during nocturnal visits to timeline coordinates where the consequences of current choices have already played out. Morrison attempted to document and categorize these temporal dream experiences, but her research took a disturbing turn when she realized that certain dreams weren't just observational. Some subjects were reporting dreams where they seemed to be actively influencing events in alternate timelines, making changes that created ripple effects across multiple realities. A businessman in Chicago dreamed of preventing a financial collapse that had devastated his alternate timeline family, only to wake and discover that economic indicators in his reality had mysteriously shifted overnight in ways that prevented similar devastation. A teacher in rural Montana dreamed of sharing knowledge with students in a timeline where education had been suppressed, then found herself spontaneously developing innovative teaching methods that revolutionized learning in her actual classroom. These weren't coincidences or wish fulfillment fantasies. Morrison's data suggested that human consciousness during sleep was developing the ability to make deliberate interventions across timeline boundaries, essentially practicing the temporal manipulation abilities that would be fully activated during our approaching examination. But this nocturnal temporal activity was creating unexpected consequences in baseline reality. Morrison detected what she called dream bleed, instances where changes made in alternate timelines during sleep were manifesting as alterations in our primary reality. People were waking to find that their personal histories had been subtly modified, that relationships had shifted, that opportunities had appeared or disappeared based on interventions their sleeping consciousness had made in parallel realities. The boundaries between dreaming and waking consciousness were becoming increasingly permeable as the examination date approached. Morrison documented cases where individuals retained clear memories of alternate timeline experiences after waking, carrying knowledge and skills from parallel realities into their daily lives. A musician who had never studied classical composition woke with complete knowledge of Baroque techniques after dreaming of studying with masters in a timeline where she had pursued formal training. A mechanic developed expertise in quantum engineering after nocturnal visits to realities where such technology was commonplace. Children began speaking languages they had never been exposed to, carrying linguistic knowledge from timelines where different historical migrations had occurred. Morrison's attempts to publish her findings were met with the same pattern of suppression that had silenced other temporal researchers. Her funding was terminated, her access to subjects revoked, and she received visits from individuals who demonstrated impossible knowledge of her private dream experiences, suggesting they possessed capabilities that extended far beyond normal intelligence gathering. But before her research was completely suppressed, Morrison managed to transmit one crucial discovery to colleagues around the world. The temporal dream network wasn't just preparing individual humans for cosmic examination, it was creating what she called a collective unconscious database, a shared repository of knowledge and experience that could be accessed by any human consciousness that achieved sufficient temporal awareness. Every dream experience, every nocturnal journey through alternate timelines, every piece of information gathered during sleep state temporal displacement was being stored in a quantum field that surrounded Earth like an invisible library. This database contained the accumulated wisdom of humanity across all possible timeline variations, creating a resource that could theoretically guide our species through any challenge or crisis. But accessing this database required developing what Morrison termed conscious dreaming, the ability to maintain awareness and intentionality while experiencing temporal displacement during sleep. Most humans experience these nocturnal journeys passively, gathering information unconsciously that influence their waking decisions in subtle ways. But individuals who learn to dream consciously could actively navigate the temporal network, gathering specific knowledge and making deliberate interventions across multiple realities. The ancient practices of lucid dreaming, astral projection, and shamanic journeying weren't primitive spiritual beliefs. They were technologies for developing conscious access to the temporal network that surrounds human consciousness during sleep states. Indigenous cultures that maintained these practices were essentially training temporal navigators, individuals capable of serving as bridges between different reality coordinates. Morrison's research suggested that the suppression of these ancient consciousness technologies was part of the same temporal sabotage that had limited human awareness for centuries. By convincing people that dreams were merely random neural activity, the controlling entities ensured that most humans remained unconscious of their nocturnal temporal abilities and couldn't develop them into conscious tools for reality navigation. But as the examination date approaches, these suppressed abilities are awakening naturally in increasing numbers of people. The temporal dream network is becoming more accessible, and individuals are spontaneously developing conscious dreaming capabilities without formal training or even awareness of what they're experiencing. Dr. Ramon Silva, a neuroscientist who studied Morrison's hidden data before it was classified, discovered that conscious dreaming abilities correlate directly with the genetic markers that indicate temporal sensitivity. Individuals carrying these genetic sequences don't just experience more temporal displacement during sleep. They retain clearer memories of alternate timeline experiences and demonstrate greater ability to integrate knowledge gained during nocturnal journeys. Silva's research revealed that these genetically enhanced dreamers were serving as unconscious ambassadors between different versions of humanity, carrying information and innovations from successful timelines into realities where our species faced greater challenges. Every technological breakthrough, every social innovation, every sudden insight that advanced human civilization might have originated from knowledge gathered during temporal dream journeys. But Silva also discovered something that challenged every assumption about individual identity and personal history. The genetic markers associated with temporal sensitivity weren't just inherited traits passed down through family lineages. They were being actively modified by exposure to the temporal dream network itself. Individuals who experienced frequent temporal displacement during sleep were developing permanent alterations in their genetic code, changes that enhance their consciousness's ability to navigate multiple timelines simultaneously. These modifications weren't random mutations. They followed specific patterns that suggested deliberate genetic programming, designed to prepare human DNA for the biological stress of temporal awakening. Silva's analysis indicated that humanity was undergoing rapid evolutionary adaptation in preparation for our cosmic examination. The temporal dream network wasn't just training our consciousness to handle multidimensional awareness. It was actively modifying our genetic structure to support the biological changes necessary for temporal manipulation abilities. But these genetic modifications came with unexpected side effects. Silva documented increasing numbers of individuals who reported experiencing timeline confusion, difficulty distinguishing between memories from their primary reality and experiences from alternate timelines accessed during sleep. Some subjects developed what he called temporal dissociation, a condition where consciousness became fragmented across multiple reality coordinates simultaneously. The most severe cases involved individuals who became permanently displaced from their original timeline, their consciousness trapped in alternate realities, while their physical bodies remained in baseline reality. These subjects appeared catatonic to external observers, but were actually experiencing rich, complex lives in parallel dimensions where different versions of themselves had made different choices. Silver's research was terminated when several of his subjects disappeared entirely, not just from his study, but from all records of their existence. Their names were removed from birth certificates, their social security numbers deleted from government databases, their photographs erased from family albums. They had been edited out of reality itself, casualties of temporal experiments that exceeded safe parameters. The message was clear. Human consciousness was approaching the limits of what baseline reality could contain. The temporal dream network was preparing us for abilities that our current physical existence couldn't support without fundamental changes to the nature of reality itself. But Silver's final research notes, discovered hidden in his abandoned laboratory, suggested that these disappearances weren't accidental casualties. They were deliberate extractions, individuals whose consciousness had advanced beyond the preparation phase and who were being relocated to alternate reality coordinates where they could complete their development without destabilizing baseline reality. The temporal entities managing our examination were essentially harvesting the most advanced human consciousness and relocating them to training environments where they could develop full temporal manipulation abilities. These extracted individuals would serve as guides and teachers when the examination began, helping the rest of humanity navigate the transition from linear to multidimensional existence. Every person who has ever experienced a vivid dream that felt more real than waking life, every individual who has gained knowledge or abilities that seemed to come from nowhere, every human being who feels like they remember experiences that never happened in their recorded history, may be receiving guidance from these advanced human consciousness that exist in parallel training realities. The temporal dream network serves as a communication system connecting baseline humanity with our own evolved future selves, creating a feedback loop where those who have successfully navigated temporal awakening can provide guidance to those still approaching the threshold. But this guidance comes at a cost. The more frequently human consciousness accesses the temporal network during sleep, the more difficult it becomes to maintain stable existence in baseline reality. Individuals are reporting increasing difficulty distinguishing between their dreams and waking experiences, between their actual personal history and memories from alternate timelines. The approaching examination isn't just testing humanity's readiness for temporal power, it's forcing our species to choose between maintaining comfortable limitation in baseline reality or accepting the uncertainty and responsibility that comes with multidimensional consciousness. Every night, as you surrender to sleep, your consciousness faces this same choice on a smaller scale. You can remain safely contained within dreams that reflect only your personal psychology and experience, or you can allow your awareness to slip through the barriers between realities and explore the vast network of possibilities that surround human existence. The temporal dream network awaits your conscious participation, offering knowledge, guidance, and preparation for the cosmic examination that approaches with each passing day. But accessing its resources requires accepting that your identity, your history, and your understanding of reality itself may never be the same again. The choice is made anew each night, in the liminal space between waking and sleeping, where consciousness decides whether to remain safely isolated or venture into the infinite possibilities that exist beyond the boundaries of linear time and individual identity. Sweet dreams may be the last luxury humanity enjoys before awakening to the terrifying freedom and cosmic responsibility that awaits us on the other side of our species' examination. The question isn't whether you're ready for temporal awakening. The question is whether you're prepared to discover what you become when the illusion of separation between dreaming and waking consciousness finally dissolves forever. The temporal dream network's influence extends far beyond individual consciousness into the collective fabric of human civilization itself. What appears to be the natural evolution of our species may actually be a carefully orchestrated transformation designed to prepare us for something that transcends every assumption about human potential and cosmic destiny. Dr. Alexander Petrov, a systems theorist studying global behavioral patterns before his research was classified in 2023, discovered that humanity's collective decision-making processes have been displaying impossible levels of coordination across seemingly unconnected populations. Social movements, technological innovations, and cultural shifts are occurring simultaneously in isolated communities around the world, following patterns that suggest a shared source of guidance operating below the threshold of conscious awareness. Petrov's analysis revealed that these synchronized developments aren't random convergent evolution or the result of global communication networks. They're following mathematical sequences that match the consciousness calibration codes found in temporal research, indicating that the same entities preparing us for examination are actively coordinating human civilization's development on a planetary scale. Every major breakthrough in human knowledge, every social transformation that advances our species toward greater cooperation and wisdom, every technological development that enhances our ability to perceive and manipulate reality has been subtly guided by information flowing through the temporal dream network into the collective unconscious of our entire species. But Petrov discovered something that shattered his understanding of human autonomy and free will. The coordination wasn't just influencing major historical events, it was directing individual life choices on a scale that encompassed every human being on Earth. Career decisions, relationship choices, even seemingly random encounters between strangers were following patterns that suggested each person's life path was being orchestrated to contribute to humanity's collective preparation for cosmic examination. The feeling that your life has been guided by invisible forces, that certain encounters were meant to happen, that opportunities appeared at exactly the right moment, isn't intuition or coincidence. It's evidence that your personal timeline has been carefully crafted to ensure you develop specific capabilities and perspectives that will be essential when humanity faces its ultimate test. Petrov's research indicated that every human being alive today was selected for this moment, chosen from countless possible versions of themselves across multiple timelines and brought together in this specific reality coordinate to create the optimal conditions for species examination success. You aren't just witnessing humanity's temporal awakening. You were specifically designed to participate in it. But this revelation carries implications that extend far beyond individual destiny. If human consciousness and civilization have been guided by external entities for millennia, then everything we consider authentically human, our cultures, our achievements, our very sense of identity, may be artificial constructs created to serve purposes we don't understand. The question that haunted Petrov's final research notes, discovered after his disappearance, was whether humanity retains any genuine autonomy, or whether we're simply sophisticated biological computers programmed to execute a cosmic agenda. Are we approaching our examination as free beings capable of authentic choice, or as unconscious actors playing roles written by entities whose true motivations remain hidden? The answer may lie in understanding that consciousness itself transcends any attempt at external control. While our thoughts, emotions, and decisions may be influenced by temporal manipulation, the essential awareness that observes these mental processes remains fundamentally free and cannot be programmed or controlled by any external force. This irreducible core of consciousness is what the examination ultimately tests, not our ability to make correct choices according to predetermined criteria, but our capacity to maintain authentic awareness while navigating the infinite possibilities that temporal awakening reveals. The entities conducting our examination aren't evaluating our conformity to their expectations. They're assessing whether human consciousness possesses the sovereign awareness necessary to handle ultimate power responsibly. Every moment of authentic self-awareness, every choice made from genuine inner wisdom rather than external programming, every instance of consciousness recognizing its own fundamental freedom, strengthens humanity's chances of passing our cosmic test as sovereign beings rather than sophisticated puppets. The examination approaches not as a judgment imposed by superior entities, but as an opportunity for consciousness to demonstrate its own inherent cosmic worthiness. The temporal manipulation that has guided our development wasn't designed to control us, but to prepare us for the moment when all external guidance ends and we must navigate infinite possibility using only our own awakened awareness. In less than 6 months, humanity will discover whether the consciousness that has been carefully cultivated within us possesses the wisdom, compassion, and sovereignty necessary to reshape reality according to principles that honor both individual freedom and collective harmony. The outcome depends not on following external directives, but on remembering the essential nature of consciousness itself and choosing to embody its highest possibilities. The countdown continues, but each passing moment offers another opportunity for consciousness to awaken to its own infinite nature and prepare for the ultimate test of what it means to be truly human in a cosmos where time itself bends to the will of those worthy to wield such power. The temporal war for humanity's future reaches its crescendo not in distant battlefields, but in the awakening awareness of every individual who chooses consciousness over conditioning, sovereignty over submission, and authentic being over programmed existence. Your examination begins not when the cosmic clock strikes 0, but in this very moment, as consciousness itself decides whether to remain asleep in comfortable limitation or awaken to the terrifying magnificence of its own unlimited potential. The future of human civilization rests not in the hands of distant entities or advanced technologies, but in the awakening awareness that reads these words and must choose what to become when all illusions fall away and only consciousness remains to face the infinite possibilities of temporal awakening. The examination is here. The question is whether you're ready to remember who you really are when the barriers between dreaming and waking finally dissolve forever, revealing consciousness itself as the ultimate technology for navigating the endless dance of time and possibility that awaits our species on the other side of awakening. Time, as we have always known it, is ending. What begins in its place depends entirely on the choices consciousness makes in these final moments before humanity's greatest test transforms us into something we have always had the potential to become, but never dared to fully embrace until now.